Hi, my name is Sarah Barron. I'm the pastor of the First United Methodist Church of Schenectady, and this is my sermon for Labor Day weekend of 2020. There is a truly great Facebook group for Young Clergy Women International, and this summer one of the members asked this question. She said, "Hey, I'm single and I'm alone and I'm really lonely during this pandemic. I know the grass is always greener, so would those of you who live with other people tell me what is really annoying about that right now?" There were a lot of responses. And eventually, some of those responses included other people living alone saying how much it helped them to know what people who were living with others were experiencing, and people who were living with others saying how helpful it was to know that they were not the only ones being annoyed. A few years ago, I came across a rather radical idea. It said that churches are places of spiritual growth, not in spite of disagreements and pettiness and annoyances with each other, but because of them. Now, every church I've ever met would prefer to be seen as being made up of entirely agreeable people who are never petty nor annoyed with each other, because after all, that's far better advertising. And churches want to be expressions of God's love in the world, and it seems like that would work best if you could at least pretend to like each other. And yet, as previously mentioned, and forgive me if you didn't know this before we started, but sometimes people are annoying. To be fair, often the things that other people do that annoy us say a lot more about us than them, but the point remains. Being in community means being in a relationship with people who annoy you, people who disagree with you, and people who find work important that you don't, and work that you find important they don't. This also applies to the people that we live with, including during the pandemic, as well as people we go to church with. There is no perfect church. They're all made up of people. Okay, this radical idea, though, was on this point, because spirituality isn't just about God and me. If it is about God and me, it's easy to think that you are doing well, growing, becoming sanctified. However, if you're active in a faith community, then it becomes imperative that you get better at loving real people in order to know that you are growing spiritually. If you aren't occasionally annoyed and getting practice being loving while annoyed, then you're not growing as well as you could be, says this theory. I love this idea. It is in our humanity, our brokenness, our disagreements, even our pettiness, that we grow. And this is the point of community. It's not one of its weaknesses. In the past year, the most spiritually helpful idea that I've come across has come from Brene Brown, suggesting that we try to always assume that other people are doing their best. That is, this is the idea that has helped me to be more loving, more patient, and more kind. Now, a few caveats are in order. This does not mean that someone's best is in fact okay, because sometimes it's not. And quite clearly, cases of abuse are in this category. But in terms of my response to other people, it's been really helpful. I would also need to note another caveat that while churches are full of annoyances and disagreements by necessity, there are also real harms done by faith communities, and those need to be taken seriously. Many of those involve rejections of God's beloveds and or functioning as an arm of the status quo when it comes to racism or sexism, heteronormativity, transphobia, ableism, or any other hierarchy that puts one person or group above another. The work of the church includes changing so that those harms don't keep happening. And yet it also involves knowing that we're going to have to keep working on each of those things so that we never become complicit or at ease in the harm that we've done. Paul suggests in our Romans passage today that we owe each other nothing but love. And I suspect that this is a more radical idea than it first appears. The ancient Roman economy, just like ours, was based on debt. People made money by having money and loaning it out to other people for interest. People who were poor lost money by being without money. And much of the world was motivated by trying to pay off debt. You may note that in the Lord's Prayer we have the lines, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." This was a big deal for Jesus as well. To step out of the system of the economy, to owe no one anything, is to prevent the rich from getting richer. But it can't simply be done by most people. That is, without a community of support. Because most people would not have and are not able to take care of themselves without acquiring debt, unless the community works together. This suggests that being debt-free meant participating in the sort of community that exemplifies the kingdom. People mutually caring for each other. That's how you owe no one anything except love. And that's how it makes sense that all that is owed is the love to one another, because such a community has to have deep bonds of love. And the rest of Paul's passage are reminders of what good community behavior looks like if you're going to build a community that can be built on love. The gospel lesson today from Matthew comes to similar points. We need to have ways of caring for our community in order to be well. Relationships matter, God-based community looks different, and we grow in faith hand in hand with others. Another way to think about this can be found in a quote by Anne Voskamp. Shame dies when stories are told in safe places. I'm going to say it again, it's really important. Shame dies when stories are told in safe places. Churches are meant to be those safe places. And for now, our Bridging the Distance groups are intentionally trying to create those safe spaces. The world uses our shame to control us, to try to get us to buy things, to believe in hierarchy, to convince us to live our lives, or to be in certain ways. But God is interested in our full and abundant lives, free to be and free to love, and in sharing that freedom with others. So God is interested in making spaces for us to share our stories and to let go of our shame. Interestingly, like forgoing debt, forgoing shame requires community support, and it enables kingdom building. It also tends to help us be less petty and deal better with annoyance. Funny that. So wherever 2 or 3 Jesus followers are gathered, may we learn to make safe space. And in the meantime, may we learn to do it in alternative ways. Amen.